Hey everyone, Monetary Mentor here. I'm here with my brother, JP. Say hi, JP.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
And we're here for a new thing we're trying out. We're going to try and record a quick video about the upcoming set, Wilds of Eldraine. It is late on the night of August 30th. The set is pre-releasing this weekend and will be hitting shelves and stores near you soon. So we figured we'd go over some of the cards. This is our first time doing this. To be completely honest, we don't have a ton of structure in mind here. We just want to talk about some cards that we like. As always with us, we're going to pay attention to the monetary side of it. We will talk about maybe some cheap cards, maybe some good deals on cards, maybe some cards to watch out for, given that we think that they're particularly playable, that they might go up over time, or might be good to keep an eye on if they get low enough to be a good pickup. But we're just mostly going to pitch cards, see what we like, and get excited for the new set that's coming out in just a week or so. So without further ado,
All right.
JP, you want to kick us off with the first card you want to talk about?
Oh boy. Well, let's start off with something very obvious. We have White Crater Hoof, everybody. It's called Moonshaker Cavalry. If you read it, it's something that's going to strike all of our EDH players as something they've seen before. And it reads as a 8 mana in white, 6/6 flying. When it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain flying and +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So this is a go wide finisher. You're going to get to 8 mana in Commander, and this is I'm going to say it's probably just for Commander format, and it's a great way to finish if you want a little variety to your Crater Who finishes. We're talking about money right now. It's sitting at $21, which seems low to me. Crater Hoof's been um, sitting between $30 and $40 for the last 5 years, as long as I can remember. So these pre-release prices are normally higher. Just keep an eye on this one because you're gonna want this card. White is a little more go wide than green, and it has a very similar effect. Sam, what do you think about it?
This card is obviously good at what it does. If I can be honest and disagree with you a little bit, I think this card will
Yeah.
probably get a little cheaper just because modern print runs are so large. And honestly, I think this card's a little boring. Like, obviously, 8 mana, if you have a board, it's probably going to win you the game in a game of Commander. But I feel like a lot of 8 mana cards can win you a game of Commander. And you do need a board for this to be good. In like 60 card formats, which it's obviously not designed for, but this isn't like a particularly great reanimator target because it's only going to be game winning
Yeah,
if you have a
exactly.
board established. So I like, yes, it'll be good at what it does, but I don't think this card doesn't like do it for me because it is just a little boring. Like, yeah, it's going to win the game sometimes when the
Yeah.
conditions are right.
Crater Hoof gets pretty boring too, but you still see it a lot. The other thing, the one downside comparison flying versus trample is really whatever meta you're in. If someone has a bunch of 1/1 flyers, this is gonna not get the job done. But it's in white, which is better for go wide, but it's not in green, and green has a ton of ways to tutor out Crater Hoof when you need it. So that would be the one downside that I see for it.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too. With all the like the fierce empaths and Greenstone
Yeah, there's a
Zenith
ton of
and Court
ways
of
for
Calling.
green. Exactly. There's a ton of ways for green to pull it out, but why not run both? You know, what's better than tutoring for a crater hoof? Just having a second crater hoof in your hand. So,
That's true. Never have too many creator hosts. All right,
all right.
I
So,
want to talk. Yeah, I want to talk about a card. So I think this card I'm going to talk about is good in Commander, but
all right.
also good in constructed formats. I think this card is just actually really good, and that card is Sir Ginger the Mealander. I have full disclosure. I've already pre-ordered mine. This card's sitting, I think, on TCG Player. The low is like 250, somewhere between 250 and $3. I don't think that's like a steal by any means, but I know I want to play this card, and I could see it getting a lot of play. It's one of the better, and by better I mean there aren't that many options, but colorless commanders available to you if you're interested in such things. Because it
And what
has
is the card, Sam?
great question. So this is Sir Ginger the Mealander.
Yes.
It's a
Yes.
2 mana colorless 3/1 legendary artifact creature with the types Food Knight. And it has trample, hexproof, and haste as long as an opponent controls a planeswalker. I consider that mostly flavor text because it's going to be relevant sometimes. But much more interestingly, whenever another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on certain Ginger and scry 1, and then you can pay 2 mana, tap it, and sacrifice it to gain life equal to its power. So this card is doing a lot. That whenever another artifact you control is put into a graveyard ability does not have that once per turn limit that they've been putting on a lot of cards that they've designed of late. And it doesn't just get big, it also helps you scry through your deck, and it is not hard to send artifacts to the graveyard. So this is fine as a commander. It's fine in the 99 of any artifact-based deck. And it does so much. So if this is your commander, you can make it huge and really threaten with commander damage. If it's in your 99 as a value piece, this is just going to get big, and for 2 mana, it just does a lot. It's going to be a threat that has to be answered, and it's going to give you pretty wild card selection if you're in any way sending artifacts to the graveyard consistently. But on top of that, like, there are a lot of combos that just essentially send infinite artifacts to the graveyard.
Yeah, there's a bajillion loops.
Yeah.
With Ironworks or any Ashnod altars, you can make this as big as you want it to if you have the right build around.
Yeah, exactly. And so for having that like combo piece in the command zone potentially, and there's also a bunch of ways to tutor up artifacts, I just think this is going to see a lot of play. It also has a nice like flavor to it, like it's kind of a meme card that people will like. It's a likable character in a.
It makes it very fun.
The art's cool, and like. What I can't get over is, like, if you make this really big and they point a removal spell at it, you can sacrifice it and gain life. Like, it just gives you value coming and going, whichever way you see it. And, like, so if you make this infinitely large and then there's no way to get, like, your vanilla large beater through, you can sacrifice it and gain infinite life, and that's another avenue this card can help you win.
I am obsessed with running this with Aetherflex Reservoir to just hit 50 to 50 as many times as you want. I think that's very exciting. I do think that you're going to see a little more Planeswalkers than you expect, and it just has to be one opponent that has a Planeswalker. So the trample is going to be somewhat relevant. I love the looping, making as big as you can. I don't know if it's good enough to give up playing any colored cards. I think there's a lot of artifact tutors in blue and red that you're going to be missing out on. So I love this in the 99 because this deck exists. Artifact.deck exists in a lot of ways. So I really love it in that deck. As a commander, it's different. You don't see a lot of colorless commanders this low mana cost. I could see it potentially being pretty competitive if you have the right cards for it. So, yeah, I'm excited to see how this one plays out.
And I'm just getting started because that was the commander talk. I'm even more interested in this card for, like, constructed formats, specifically Pioneer.
Yeah, do you have any, like, loops that you know of that this will get infinitely large in?
Yes, so I am personally obsessed with Saheeli Rai as a card.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, famously. And so Saheeli Rai has a combo with Luxior, where you can equip Luxior to Saheeli Rai, which turns it into a creature, -2 Saheeli, targeting itself because it's a creature, which makes an artifact copy of itself. You keep the artifact copy, which can then -2 on itself because it's an artifact, and it has to target an artifact or a creature. So you can loop that infinite times, and the new copy goes to the graveyard every time because of the legend rule, and each copy that does that is a artifact. So it will make Sir Ginger infinitely large, stack your whole deck because you scry infinite times. And what's neat about that is this card is also just good with Luxior if you have to throw it on as an equipment, because if this card has like 3 or 4 counters on it over the course of the game with the other artifacts you're playing in the deck, you throw Luxior on there to give it +3/+3, +4/+4. And this card's a legitimate threat. It's low on the mana curve. It's very competitively costed and playable. So the key to that combo is having cards that are good when you don't have all the pieces of it intact.
Yeah.
And this card, I think, gives you a lot of flexibility there. So is that going to be a tier 1 deck? I don't think so, but am I going to be jamming that a lot?
Yeah.
Am I jamming that a lot? I sure am.
If you're jamming it a lot, you need to run like a gifting effect to gift them the Sahili so that you turn on the trample, hexproof, and haste like the last one. You just send it over there. Say, here you go, buddy. Nice blockers. Here's 99 to the face.
I hadn't even thought about that, but that's so funny. That would definitely make the deck worse. Make the deck way worse.
Sure.
But yeah, for style points, you can't beat it.
However,
All right. Fine. Now it's your turn to pitch a card. Sorry I had to talk for a million hours on Search Engine.
That's a fun card. This might go on a while, but I'm down for it. All right. So the next one up I got for you is another very boring basic commander staple, Stroke of Midnight. This is a 3-mana uncommon, thank goodness. Instant speed, white. This says destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 1/1 human creature token. This is coming in for under $1 right now. And this is an interesting study on prices because this card exists in a very similar state. Generous Gift. It's a commander staple. It's a very similar effect, but they get a 3/3 elephant instead of a 1/1 human. At lower power tables, that matters a little bit. At higher power tables, it doesn't matter at all between a 1/1 and a 3/3. The difference is, I believe Generous Gift gets rid of any permanent. So if you're running against Field of Dead decks, or someone has a proxy of Gaia's Cradle, then you're going to want the Generous Gift. But other than that, Stroke of Midnight is strictly better. I'm so happy they printed it as an uncommon removal. I think it might, see 60 card standard play just as a removal because it affects Shieldred. But yeah, this is going to be interesting to see where this one goes because Generous Gift, I See You Wizards, was a $4 card like 3 years ago, and they got their value reprinting it to the ground and is just now a pretty cheap, I think it's like 50 cents now. They finally got all the reprint value of it just at the Stroke of Midnight. Comes in, and now we got a new card. And uncommons can get pretty expensive when everyone's going to want a play set of these. They're going to want one in every white deck they have. And as we've seen from the Nazgul set, I think it might get a little expensive. Right now, under $1. I don't know how long it stays that way. What do you think, Sam?
Well, so, yeah, it's an interesting study in price because I do like this card. I put one in my cart when I pre-ordered my Sir Gingers because I just want to have this lying around. This card can't get too expensive because if it gets to be a couple bucks, people are going to play Generous Gift instead, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think that keeps the lid on it a bit. Something else I like about this card is it makes a human token, which is more relevant in a tribal sense. So I don't know if I like this card for constructed format. In Commander, if you're running a Human Matters deck, this is a nice piece of removal to have because in a pinch, you could use it on your own thing lying around to get another... To get another human enters the battlefield effect or another body that gets pumped by lords or whatnot. So I just think this card has a lot going on. And I agree, this is probably going to be $1 forever kind of card. Maybe a couple.
It might creep up because we don't know if they're going to... I hope they just keep this under $1 because they, these are the staples that need to stay cheap. So hopefully they reprint it at some point. Stroke of Midnight is generic enough to throw into most sets, but... we will see. We will see.
All right. I've got another card I want to talk about, going back to the constructed side of things. And that is Gumdrop Poisoner. And
I'm so glad you brought this up because this might be my favorite card.
Yeah, so I've gone on a journey with this card. I started thinking that it was fine because adventure cards are almost always fine. But the more I thought about it, specifically for like Standard and Pioneer, the more it seemed bananas. Because this card, first of all, that the adventure side of it, and this card is a 3-mana creature. It's a 3/2 lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, a creature gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is the amount of life you've gained that turn. And the adventure side of it, 1 black mana, instant, create a food token. Very simple, but it plays into itself very nicely. And adventure cards are always good when they curve the adventure half into the creature half. right? So it is not going to be hard to find a way when you have 1 black mana floating around to just send this on an adventure, get your essentially free food token, and then get a 3 mana 3/2 lifelinker, which is like reasonably statted, and when it has an ETB effect to potentially kill something. And so what's nutty about this is you just think about the cards that it is going to see play with. This is going to be in Sheoldred decks, which is gaining you life when you draw at the beginning of your turn.
Yes.
At the very worst, on turn, when you have 5 mana available, you crack your food token from this, you play the Poisoner, that's a 2-for-1, baby. Like, that's clean living, right? That's the good stuff. Yeah. And if this can be blinked, if you're going for like in Pioneer, maybe like a white-black Yorion deck for repeated value, it plays in with itself really well in multiples, because if you have one on the battlefield, you can attack, get the life gain from lifelink, and play another one out. This thing, it just like does a lot, and it doesn't ask very much of you.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's not legendary, so you can run a 4 of and not have any issues. You can have 2 of these suckers on the battlefield, swing in, and then drop to give something -6/-6, and that is gets around indestructible, sends it straight to the graveyard. Creating a food token for 1 mana, bargaining in this set is a good thing. So if you just get a free bargain, you'll see some cards, especially in black, maybe we'll talk about it later, the bargains just amp it all the way up, and you're not even losing a card by creating that.
Right.
I love putting down a 3/2 body against aggro with lifelink.
Oh my gosh.
You're fine there. Just totally ruin their day. Get the play with fire out of their hands on your creatures instead of your face. I love this as a 4 of. I don't know if it's good.
Well, no, that's kind of how I feel about it too. I went on an adventure with this card.
I think you need to have more life gain in your deck, and Sheoldred, yes, maybe not budget friendly, but we're gonna have this card around for 3 years in standard. I don't know if it's strong enough in larger formats, but if there's a black deck that has incidental life gain that's built around life gain, this is your removal right here. It's a creature with removal, and it has an adventure. So, heck, this is 2 cards for 1. It says, if this was, it's going to be exciting to see what we can do with this card.
Yeah, and we can move on from this card soon, but I thought of more things to say about how great this card is.
Hit me with the best one.
This card in black decks in Pioneer turns on Fatal Push's Revolt, because it gives you a food token that you can sacrifice to have a permanent leave the battlefield, which is extremely relevant. Fatal Push decks that can consistently trigger Revolt are bananas. And it can Crew Reckoner Bankbuster, which is a ridiculously good value card in black-based Pioneer decks too. So you can Bankbuster on 2, play this on 3, crew it up, and get in there. And I think you're right. This card... But it stymies aggro entirely with all the life that it gives you, and the value, and it's a ridiculous mid-range card. So this is not going to win your matchup against combo and control decks, but in a mid-range matchup or an aggro matchup, this card is bananas.
Yeah, and you're not going to feel bad drawing this late game either, because it just kind of turns into like a 6 mana removal spell with a body.
Yeah.
So it's like it's gonna get its value for sure.
Exactly. All right, what do you got next?
All right. Well, are you ready for something that's been missing from standard for a long time? And
Right.
You ready for the herald of its return?
Are you talking about 2 mana Mana Rocks?
Ooh, I'm talking about the best 2 mana mana rock that has ever been printed. You heard it here first. It is an uncommon. Okay, 22 cents for this. It is Ruby Daring Tracker. I am convinced that this is going to make Gruul aggro relevant.
So I'd want you to know I'd already pulled up the Iron Crag on my computer, because I was positive that's what you were going to talk about. Positive, yeah.
No. This is something that I think is under everyone's radar. And this is Land of War Elves mixed with Pelt Collector, mixed with Gruul Spellbreaker, all in one card. I'm obsessed with it. I can't wait to play with it in standard and just see what we can do, because this archetype doesn't exist, because it doesn't have cards like this.
All right, read the card.
All right, here we go. I'm just pumping.
I know, so exciting.
It is Gruul, red and a green, 2 mana. It is legendary, which is a little bit downside, but it has haste. You can tap it for a red or a green, and then it also has whenever Ruby Daring Tracker attacks while you control a creature with power 4 or greater, Ruby gets +2/+2 until end of turn. She's a 1/2, so the +2/+2 would make her a 3/4. So you're telling me I can get a 2 mana 3/4 haster for like, come on, give me this. You're gonna be in the colors that's gonna give you bulky green creatures. You can play it on turn 2 and then add another 1-drop. You can play it on turn 3 and play another 2-drop right away. If you draw this late game on a static board, all of a sudden you have another attacker that's going to trade up. I mean, what's not to love about this card?
Okay, I agree that this card is sweet. Something I didn't hear you mention is its Bard class applications, which I've heard a lot of people talking about.
Yeah.
This feels like a very natural inclusion in that because it does the ramping that deck wants to do and the beating down that deck wants to do. I do want to rain on the Ruby Parade just a little bit.
Go ahead.
In that 2 mana rocks are usually pretty good because they don't die to shock, which Ruby does. But on top of that, it's far, like, I'm sure there are a bunch of sweet places for this card. I'm not poo-pooing that at all. But if we think about Pioneer, which is all I think about, the red-green decks there, I'm thinking specifically about like the Gruul Boats deck. They run 8 mana elves on one. And so I don't know how many more dorks you want in that set, because I don't see you cutting mana elves for this, like Llanowar elves and Elvish Mystic. Because they also skip you from 1 mana to 3 mana, and then all your heavy hitters on the curve are on 3 mana. So this jumps you from 2 to 4 mana, which is like a less significant jump, I think, in constructed mid-rangey aggro decks.
It also jumps you from, if you play that Llanowar elf on turn 1, turn 2 you play Ruby Daring Tracker, and you still have 2 mana on turn 2 after playing those two. You could play another Llanowar elf, and then on turn 3 you have, 6 mana? I mean, I think this can coexist.
Yeah, I do not think this card is bad. I just don't know if I think it's good either. But it's definitely sweet. It's definitely sweet. And I think the option in Commander, if you just have like a red-green deck where like the Commander doesn't matter, having a 2 mana rock in your command zone is kind of nice.
If you want to play Gruul Beatdown and you don't really have, I think this will make your Gruul Beatdown strategy pretty smooth in Commander. And it's very unassuming. No one's going to sit down across the table from Ruby Daring Tracker and like, oh, that's the number 1 enemy. We gotta get her off the field as soon as possible. No one's gonna look twice at you.
Yeah,
it's kind of where you want to be.
100%.
All right, Sam. Why don't you just tee up the Iron Crag, since that's what you want to talk about so much?
No, I thought you wanted to talk about the Iron Crag.
No. Oh, you buddy.
So.
You got something up.
No. I do have other things. The Iron Crag bores me. It bores me.
Does it bore you?
Yeah, a little bit. I want to talk about Horned Lockwhale.
Ooh, okay.
Another adventure, and as we talked about, this is another adventure where you're almost always going to be casting the adventure half before the creature half, so you're almost always going to get both halves of the card. So this card is under $1. It's a rare.
That's insane to me.
Lagoon Breach reminds me a lot of Petty Theft from Brazen Borrower, except it's different, obviously. So this card, it's a 6 mana creature with Flash, Ward 2, and it's a 6/6, and it enters the battlefield tapped unless it's your turn, which is just so you can't flash it in and get a block. But you can flash it in on the end of your opponent's turn. Or if you need a blocker, you can play it on your turn. That's an option. And then the adventure for 2 mana, 1 and a blue, instant, the owner of target attacking creature you don't control puts it on the top or bottom of their library. So it's a removal spell that turns into a finisher with ward, both of which can be played at instant speed. So in any deck that plays primarily at instant speed, this is just like, it's going to control the game early and end the game late. The Lagoon Breach adventure effect putting like attacking creature on the top or bottom of a library is way more powerful than putting it back in their hand, because it's either gone forever, or they don't get to draw a different card next turn. You essentially steal their draw step from them.
Totally ruins their plan.
So I think this is really good. Like, maybe I would say definitely if there's a blue control deck in Standard, this seems like you would factor into it. If there's a like flash deck in Pioneer, I like this as a top end to that, which has always been a fairly anemic deck, but maybe this is what it's missing, the interaction in green and blue. So I like this card a lot. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I love it a lot. I'm a little scared of it, actually. I like playing these archetypes, but I hate playing against them. I have been known to play Seal Away. I think Seal Away is a great card. And this is just Seal Away with upside. It's going to be in a lot of the same decks that you play it. Attacking creature. Oh, nope, you don't have lethal. You can put it on top of your library, but I'm probably going to Wrath next turn. And then what I like about it is, so when you cast the Adventure, the opponent's going to know it's there. So it's just going to sit there at 6 mana, and I think it's going to make your opponent play into your counter spells. A lot of times when you're playing against control decks, you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to not play because I know he has counter spells. It might make the opponent think, like, well, I have to do something or else he's going to cast this Horned Lock Whale on my end step and then swing at me for 6 every turn from here on out. So let me play. Oh, shoot, I just got countered. So this is going to be a great card for a patient control deck. It's insane it's under $1. I think it's going to go up. I think it's going to see play in Standard in any format that you play Draw Go. And the only comparison I have, I'm curious if your thoughts are, is how it compares to Hullbreaker Horror.
It's a good question. So...
Is it Hullbreacher Horror?
Hullbreaker Horror. I think it's Hullbreaker Horror.
Hullbreacher got banned.
That's true. That was a horror.
It does not compare well to me.
No. Yeah. So
Breaker, maybe.
Yeah. So I don't see a lot of Hullbreaker horror these days. Where I mostly see it is like out of the sideboard of Indomitable Creativity decks and Pioneer, as like a juke plan in games 2 and 3 post sideboard. I think it compares favorably if you're trying to play it in like a control type deck, just because it's useful before the end of the game. You know, like it's going to be hard for your opponents to run you over in your control deck if your finishers are also stalling the game out. You know what I mean? Where Hullbreaker costs more mana, so it's going to be coming down later. And when I've played it, I've always been a little disappointed. It doesn't really matter because your opponent always scoops as soon as you resolve the Hullbreaker horror. But actually, I feel like my hand usually doesn't have enough spells to like completely lock them out of the game with it. So I kind of like this card more.
I think it's an interesting comparison because the Horned Lock Whale has Ward 2, which when it's dropped, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I just think this is going to be... I don't know, what are the finishers for this other, like Wandering Emperor?
Yeah.
Wandering Emperor gets there. It takes a couple more turns. So, yeah, I think what makes this card is the adventure. If this was just 6 mana flash, this is what... I'm going to go a little mini rant about adventure because I don't think Wizards learned their lesson about just putting 2 cards for the price of 1. These are 2 cards that could absolutely exist by themselves.
Yeah.
They would both... the Lagoon Breach would be uncommon. The Lock Whale, heck, that could be rare too. Like, these are 2 cards that could exist on their own. They're going to play with curve. But when we talk about comparing the Horned Lock Whale to the Hullbreaker and the Lagoon Breach to Seal Away, it just comes up aces because it's both of them. And card advantage is everything when you're playing these control matches. So... I give this a... I'm very concerned about this card.
Yeah, a little bit. And I will say this card is... The fact that it only bounces attacking creatures that you don't control does limit its usability a little bit, because you're going to play a lot of decks that don't have creatures, and this deck isn't going to do a lot. But that's kind of the wild thing about it, is if that's the case, you still just have a 6 mana 6/6 flash creature hanging out.
Yeah.
It's not a dead card, so yeah, this card is a lot. So we'll see, but this card does a lot. All right, you got another one for us?
I have the most powerful card ever printed. All right.
Okay, I'm
You
interested.
ready for it?
Yeah.
It's a 4 mana 4/1. It's called Wrinkles Prank.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Double black. Choose one or more at sorcery speed. So you can choose all 3 if you want. Each player discards 2 cards. Each player loses 4 life. Each player sacrifices 2 creatures. So this looks like a balanced effect. Like, it looks like both players are going to be punished the same. But you're not going to, because you're going to build your deck differently. Okay? You're going to have ways to play around where the discarding 2 cards is advantageous to you, or it doesn't affect you. And you're not going to be playing creatures on turn 3 when you know this is in your hand. So just imagine you're against a deck that plays, I don't know, in Standard you play a Tithe Harvester into Sheoldred. And then you just do this, and they lose both of those, and 2 cards from your hand. And the downside of this is that you might not want to discard 2 cards from your hand, but there's a lot of ways, as we get more Reanimator and more Reanimator targets, Reanimator spells. Like, you could run a Reanimator set out of this, drop your Atraxa or your Atali in the graveyard or whatever strikes your fancy, and then on turn 5, hey, you reanimate it. You could also run a ton of adventures. You could dump all your hands, put them all on adventures, and maybe you don't try to get them all out on turn 4, but on turn 5, hey, look. And the thing is, when you get to this point, this card seems even more valuable against the opponent, because they probably have their 2 best cards in their hand. They probably have their Collected Company sitting there ready to pop off and drop angels or life-gaining anything onto the battlefield. And they probably have their creatures that are setting up right there on the battlefield. If this deck exists, this will be the best card in the deck by far.
Oh yeah, and it'll be miserable. It'll be absolutely miserable.
Yeah, it'll be a total blowout. It's a 4/1. Imagine like mulliganing down to 4 every single game. That's what it's going to be like playing against this card.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have eyed this card on and off, and I think your point is exactly right. That this card is going to be nuts if you've built your deck around it, and you're going to, and it's going to be the best deck best card in your deck every time, because you can play flashback cards, you can play Reanimator targets, you can play unearth cards. If you can make your discard not that bad, and you're not playing creatures and they are, this card is just, you're absolutely right. It's bananas. I will say the couple of things here is that if your opponent is not on a creature-based deck, this card is very bad. Because no, I would say very bad, because you're spending the card for you to both discard 2 cards, and the 4 life essentially doesn't matter in that instance. So this might be like a sideboard card, but when this card is good, it is just like flip the table over and storm out. I don't want to play Magic anymore good, which is a little concerning. The other point I'll make against it is this card might be balanced around that each player losing 4 life effect, because that's not insignificant if you're playing the control deck against like a more aggressive deck and they're really pressuring your life total. If they have 3 creatures out and you play this and they get rid of the worst 2 and their hand's already empty because they've curved out on turns 1 through 3, or if they're on the play turn 4 as well, they're not going to have cards to discard. You're not going to have life to give up. And
but you don't have to. It's Moly. You don't have to lose the 4 life.
What? Hold on. Choose.
Yeah, you get to choose. I was just gonna say that. Like,
what?
Yeah, you don't even have to do the discard. You can just play this as like a double edict 2/1 on turn 4, which I think is going to be reasonable if you don't want to discard the card in your hand. I don't think anyone's dumping their whole. Yeah, I don't think anyone's. You can play this on turn 4. Even if they've played their turn 4, they probably still have their. They might even be like, oh, I'm just gonna hold my shouldered in my hand. I'll play a shouldered. I have a shouldered in my hand. Like, ha ha ha, I've got this. And no, it's gone.
All right, I take it all back. This card's cracked in half.
Yeah, so it's at $1.50 now, and I think it just depends on whether you want to build this deck because this is not a card I think that you're just going to throw in any deck that wants to play control or card advantage. I think you're going to have little. Well, maybe you will. Maybe it'll be that good. But I think if you want to build this deck, um, then it's going to be a lot of fun. I think the Reanimator is a little bit more powerful than the Adventure thing, just because our Adventure creatures are. I mean, maybe you just. Maybe you just do the adventures. Try it out. Try adventures. Try Reanimator. Try and make that discard 2 cards not hit you as hard, and see where this card gets you. Because I'm pretty excited to build around it.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. All right, I have a card that's honestly a little boring, but
right, I'm in for it. We have
yeah.
Good cards.
Well, honestly, this set is great, and I want to kind of do like a speed round at the end. There's some cards I just want to mention that I think are just like surprisingly good. Maybe not like best in class good, but like for what they are, it's like, wow, I can't believe this card does all of this. But the card I want to talk about is Werefox Bodyguard.
Oh yeah, that's worth a lot of talk.
Yeah, so this card's like 60 cents right now.
That's going to go up.
Well, it has to, right? Like, this effect... So, this is a 3-mana flash 2/2 elf fox knight. So, 2 relevant creature types. That when it enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 other target non-fox creature until Werefox Bodyguard leaves the battlefield. And you can pay 2 mana and sacrifice it to gain 2 life. So, this card kind of does anything you want it to do. So, we've had a lot of this effect, this like Fiend Hunter effect... Yeah. Before, and it's always pretty reasonable. The Werewolf in Standard sees a fair amount of play. Yeah, and in Pioneer Human decks it comes in and out. So it's definitely reasonable, but this effect's never had flash before. Right? So I think every time that I see them take an effect that we've had before that's been decent and just like give it something it's never had before, like tacking draw a card onto an effect, or scry 1 onto an effect, or knocking a mana off the cost, or giving it flash. Those cards tend to be really good. And this card doesn't only play Fiend Hunter, it also plays Protect Your Own Creature. Because you can exile your own thing and then sack this to gain 2 life and get your thing back. So the flexibility,
it's expensive, but sometimes you're going to want to do that, and it's going to win you the game.
Yeah, 100%. On top of being just a already good effect that we've never had be this good before with the flash. So I think this card could be one of those cards you see every day for the next 3 years. Like it just reads that way to me. If it has a home, this card is going to be one you see a lot.
Yeah. So Brutal Cathar is like $2.50, and this one is less than $1. I think this is like product fatigue. We're like, we already have Brutal Cathar. I think this is the clearest. I don't know if you know, but or if the listener knows, this set was supposed to be released as Brutal Cathar was going out of Standard. So I think this is like the standard, hey, we lost our 3-mana card. That this is the clearest example to me that they were not aware that Brutal Cathar would be out of Standard at this time. The Brutal Cathar does have some upside on it, though.
That's true.
It's a human, which is great in the human deck that exists. And there's something that happens, or it threatens the opponent to happen, where you can actually get 2 triggers out of the Brutal Cathar if they don't play any spells, and you play 2. However, I think protecting your own creatures, I like it a lot. I like this as like an answer to a Wrath, where you save your best creature. You can sacrifice it yourself if in case they don't kill it, so you can get it back. It's expensive, but sometimes you're going to want to do it. I don't think the creature types are as good as human, but Flash makes everything so much better.
I know.
And I expect this one will see a lot of play in definitely standard. You might even want to do it in a blink deck. Thinking about it for my Emil blink deck, just because, yeah, it's going to do a lot of work. We've seen this effect before. This effect has been good, and this is one of the better versions of that effect.
Yeah, and I'll say on the Brutal Cathar front, like, Brutal Cathar was another example of them taking a known Fiend Hunter type effect and just adding a little bit of juice on top of it with the ability for it to get more cards and transforming, which doesn't happen that often, but it's a little upside. And this card is like another attempt at, all right, we take this effect since we're losing Brutal Cathar to standard rotation. Here's another card with a little bit of upside. But I think this one actually has a lot of upside. So we'll see. But I think this card's...
One last thing about Brutal Cathar. As like a 5th and 6th effect version of this copy, Brutal Cathar is the card when you're playing against this deck, you're hoping that they don't have 2 of. Alright, you're hoping against hope that you can get blockers down, stop these Adeline swings. You're just hoping that your first blocker gets removed, but your second blocker sticks. You might consider running this even in the humans deck as the 5th and 6th copy of Brutal Cathar, because you're mono white, and that effect is what clears it out and lets you win the game.
Yeah. Yeah, for real. Hey, play 8 of them. Just play mono white 3-drop tribal.
I think you're really hey, watch it happen.
All right, that's not financial advice. People, do not play 8 of these effects in your standard deck until someone else proves that it's good. Yeah. Banishing light.
Do not share this cross and for us, but yeah, let's keep an eye on it. See what happens. I think I get to put another fun white card forward.
Do it.
And this is, I think, broken.
Go on.
I think it's super cheesy, and it is Archon of the Wild Rose. I think you're going to have nut draws with this deck and be done on turn 4.
Yeah, for sure.
The card is a 4-mana creature Archon with flying in white. Other creatures you control that are enchanted by auras you control have a base power and toughness 4/4 and have flying, and it's a 4/4. So it's a 4-mana 4/4 with flying. And the text doesn't make sense unless you look at the rest of the set. The rest of the set is full of all these effects that put little auras, tokens, aura tokens. Can you imagine what a world we live in? They're not even like, they seem to be part of the card essentially. So if you just get 1-drops, 2-drops, 3-drops, it's going to be a little bit, and these are all going to be cheap cards. These are a lot of uncommons, a couple rares. This deck, I think, is going to be pretty budget friendly, and I think it's going to get there because you drop a 1-drop, a 2-drop, a 3-drop, and all these auras give them +1/+1. So on turn 4, it's not unreasonable. You could have 3 5/5 flyers ready to attack, and you just do a little bit of chip damage before you drop this, and it's game over.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that at all. I will say, I think this is a fun standard deck to potentially build.
You just remove this and then you fall.
No, it does, because if you play this on turn 4 and they remove it, after you attack, and then they remove this and you get blown out.
There are going to be blowouts.
Yeah, or if you just don't find this card, then you're playing a deck of roll card tribal, hoping that they get there, and they probably aren't.
There are other inset payoffs. There's a 2-mana Anthem that gives everyone +2/+2.
That's true.
And there's also, still in standard, there's Skrelv, which is going to protect us from most targeted removal.
That's true, and the Audacity is still in the set, which is a pretty good aura. So I think the deck exists in standard. I think when this card is nutty, it is nutty. I don't know if this will be taken seriously at the top tables. I'd be surprised. But when the deck does the thing, it will be really cool, or really aggravating, depending which side of the table you're sitting on. But if someone's playing auras against you, save a removal spell for this card when it comes down.
Because this guy, when it comes down, wait for them to declare attackers, and then see what happens. All right, you got another one for me there, Sam?
I mean, I could talk about essentially every card in this set. I do.
Could you?
So we're close to just hitting some lightning round ones, but I did want to talk about Discerning Financier a little bit.
Okay.
So this is a 3-mana human noble, relevant creature type. It's a 2/3, but this guy is not meant for combat. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls more lands than you, create a treasure token. Pay 3 mana, choose another player. That player gains control of target treasure you control. You draw a card. This is the latest in a long line of cards that really annoy me, which I call pushed white commander cards.
Hey, white's really the worst card color in Commander. Haven't you heard?
Well, don't design cards for commander. That's the point. It drives me bananas. Well, don't put them in my standard sets. But this card, like, why would you not play this in a white commander deck? Like, what does it do that isn't amazing? Because for 3 mana, it just sits there, and opponents are gonna have more land than you, and you just make treasure tokens every turn. If you're playing any kind of like treasure-based deck, paying 3 mana to draw a card off of it seems pretty decent. It's gonna generate its own treasures. Like, this card just seems like you should play it in white decks unless you have a specific reason not to play it in white commander decks.
Yeah, I have a couple counterpoints. I hear you loud and clear, but the short answer why you wouldn't play it is if you're in Selesnya or have green, because you will not be triggering this a lot. The other side of this is that this is a 3-mana mana rock. Treasures are maybe more adjustable than whatever your 3-mana mana rock could do, but there's a lot of 3-mana mana rocks with upside that I think are better than a 2/3 body and a really awkward 3-mana draw card. I don't think it's bad, but I play a lot of white commander decks, and I'm not really going crazy over this card. Yeah, I could be wrong, but
No, you could be right. Those are valid points, and I'm looking at the price tag, and it's like less than 50 cents, which is a little concerning because you'd think if it was a slam dunk commander staple, the fans would be foaming at the mouth, and this would be like a $90 pre-order card.
it is uncommon.
Yeah,
I mean,
but still.
If you're running a white humans deck, and you're just having fun at like a mid to low power, this is going to be a totally fine card in your deck.
Yeah. All right, you got some more?
Yeah, I have. Let's talk real quick about Decadent Dragon, because this is the only card that I know is going to be in standard as 4 of in most decks.
All right, the prophet has spoken. Tell me why. Read the card.
All right, let me pull it up here. Decadent Dragon is a. Oh my god. Oh, I'm just overwhelmed by the value. The art's a little weird, but
No, Wiley Beckett never misses. I love this
every
art.
time it's funky, but I like it. I can't read this card without just having little twinges. It's a 4-mana red card.
Calm down.
Trample. Whenever this Decadent Dragon attacks, create a treasure token. So it's a 4-mana flying trample ramp card. It's a 4/4. Oh, wait, there's another card stapled on top of it. A 3-mana instant adventure. Exile the top 2 cards of target opponent's library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remained exiled. They reprinted Divination, I believe, at instant speed. This is kind of... Oh, my goodness. So, how to break it down. The idea is that when it attacks, you create a treasure token, and they'll use those treasure tokens to cast the opponent's cards. However, you very well may get a land in this, and you can play that land, and it's very likely that that land is going to be the colors that card is. I think that's going to happen more often than not. There's not a lot of 3 green pips on cards these days. And so it's a 3-mana draw 2. It's from your opponent's deck, so it's not as synergistic of what you're doing. but this is just total value. It has 2 cards on this 1 card. It's one of its cards draws you 2 cards. The other one is a competitively costed flying trample 4/4 that ramps you. All right, tell me why this is not just a guaranteed lock for an already popular Rakdos. And don't say Shieldred.
Okay, first of all, Shieldred. Second of all...
Yes, you can always play Shieldred in your 4-drop slot and be happy. Go ahead.
Second of all, I mostly agree that this card is a pile of value.
It's so much value.
Yeah, so in a red-black deck that's interested in value, which a lot of them are, I think this card's going to do a lot for you. I totally am with you on that. I do want to point out a couple of things. One, we just talked about the Archon, which is a 4-mana 4/4 flyer. Right. In Modern, they print a lot of 4-mana 4/4 flyers with some kind of upside these days. That's like the going rate, and I haven't seen a lot of them see play. Like, just that stat block doesn't seem to be cutting it on its own. You have to attack to get the treasure token, so it has to live for a turn.
It doesn't have haste.
And there's a world you talked about. If you hit a land off your opponent's top 2 cards,
on 2 cards, very well may.
There's a really good chance, but I mean, if you hit 2 non-land cards and then this dies to a Doomblade from your opponent, you've spent 7 mana to do nothing to your opponent's 2 mana, which is a big investment. So yes, this is a pile of value. I think it's going to be good if a pile of value is all you need in your deck for it to be good. But I think if a format's more tempo-based and punishing of turns that don't do a whole lot beyond grind out value, I think this card could fall into that anemic 4/4 flyer for 4 category.
It's not great against aggro, I'll say that. It's not great against aggro. And it's just on top of standard. Has a lot of grind fests. This is grinding your opponent by a lot. You get the full value from this card, you're just gonna be, yeah. I can see where it's just you spend 7 mana and get Doombladed.
Yeah.
And you outlawed, exiled 2 cards. The other side is like you can play those cards for as long as they remained exiled. So if you just incidentally create treasures, you may end up playing those cards. I think the odds are that you will hit a land out of the 2, and that's just going to be value, but
yeah,
we'll see. This is just a good, this is definitely a good card. I expect you'll see this tried out a lot in various Rakdos decks and shells, because it doesn't need anything to work. It's the whole thing is right there. It reminds me a lot of Bone Crusher Giant, where it's just like 2 into 3, 3 into 4, it instant a solid creature, competitively costed. Except it doesn't give you the removal that Bone Crusher gives you, it just gives you value. So for playing a value meta, this is a great card for it.
Yeah, no, I hear people will play this card. Absolutely, yeah. People will play this card. I just remains to be seen if it has a bunch of sticking power. Okay, semi-lightning round, because there's some cards. Yeah,
just hit them on them, and I'll tell you why you're wrong.
Okay. Candy Trail, 1-mana artifact food clue. When it enters the battlefield, scry 2, pay 2, sacrifice it, you gain 3 life and draw a card. I really like my fiddly artifact decks that just move cards from one zone to another and accrue value, and I think this is maybe the best version of that we've ever seen.
Yeah. It's 3 mana instead of 2 to get your cantrip, but you get a scry 2 and 3 life. So maybe it also curves itself like 1 into 2.
Mm-hmm.
Not terrible. You can set your game up pretty well.
Yeah, and I think this card usually, I mean, I can see this being sacrificed to a lot of other effects too. It's just decks that like getting artifacts on the battlefield are gonna like that.
Oh, I see it. I could see it if you're running some sort of control deck. You just drop this, and it's gonna set you up well. Those scry 2s are really going to make sure you're hitting your land drops and getting to your wraths if you need a wrath, or your card draw if you need card draw.
Yeah.
So I like it.
I want to draw a little attention to Ego Drain and Fairy Fencing, which are both 1-mana black spells. Ego Drain takes a card out of your opponent's hand, and then you exile a card from your hand if you don't control a fairy. And fairy fencing gives a creature -X/-X to the end of turn. It's an X1 black spell. It gets an additional -3/-3 until end of turn if you control this fairy as you cast a spell. So this is like the fairy interaction package they're giving you on a platter. It's like here's Thoughtseize and Fatal Push in your standard format if you're playing a fairy deck, because they need that.
So much of the Dimir Rogues package, where you had Drown in the Loch as just like a complimentary do whatever you want card just for playing the archetype.
Yeah.
It does make me think that unlike a lot of tribal decks, this deck could definitely have some legs.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and people love fairies, so you're going to see a lot of this in your standard arena games for sure. I want to talk about Elusive Otter, which is...
Oh, that's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, it's a 1-mana prowess creature that can't be blocked by creatures with power less than it. This is our 3rd 1-mana prowess creature, along with Monastery, Swiftspear, and Soulscar Mage, which by itself is really good, and this has upside. Both those cards also have upside, but this one's is that it can't be blocked, which is going to be great in any prowessy deck. I mean, it can be blocked, but there are some situations where it won't be able to be blocked. But then just stapling the adventure onto this. So if you're thinking about like a Teamer red, blue, green prowess deck where now you have 3 prowess 1-drops potentially, the fact that that deck struggles if you draw too many creatures or not enough creatures, and this being a creature and a spell that can trigger prowess or be the spell that you want to trigger prowess on just seems really flexible and good. And it's tough to run 3 colors in Pioneer, especially in aggressive decks. But the adventure on this one is more of like a late game finishing spell. So if you just find like 1 green source or a mana confluence by turn like 4 or 5, I think you're totally fine playing this in a mostly Izzet deck. And so this card just seems like it does a lot to me. Maybe it won't find a home. Maybe prowess even juiced up a little bit isn't good enough. But I think this card has a lot going for it.
I like this one a lot, especially just in the shell that you were talking about for it. I think that creatures with power less than this power can't block it. Very relevant text. The only question I had was what you said is you really want this to be a 3-color deck. But you're going to love casting. You're going to have creatures, and you're going to love casting Grove's Bounty for X equals whatever you don't have covered by the rest of the spells in your hand. I love that it can just be a 1-mana prowess trigger. I love that if you have a bunch of mana just sitting around, you can use it. I like this card a lot, and I'm excited to see how the archetype uses it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, lightning round. I like Hopeless Nightmare. I like Monstrous Rage. I like Royal Treatment. I like Spiteful Hexmage. I like Torch the Tower. This set just has a bunch of stuff in it. I like Bitter Chill. So this, actually, I want to talk about this just a little bit. We talked about like when they give a card an effect that we have seen before and they just juice it a little bit. So I think they juiced this effect as much as they possibly could without like breaking the game. So we get a lot of like 3-mana blue enchantments for limited that tap a creature and it doesn't untap. Right? Like that's... So this card is 2 mana, an aura, enchants a creature, it doesn't untap. But those auras often get removed. This one, for some reason, comes with the upside that when it's removed, you may pay 1. If you do scry 1, then draw a card. So this is like a 2-mana removal spell in blue that if they deal with it, you're not totally blown out. Like, I can't believe they gave us this effect for 2 mana and put that when it's removed effect on it.
It's something special. There's also a knockoff Elsa in the set that loves tapping creatures. This keeps it tapped. This gives power to that archetype. This might make that archetype work as a thing. I love that if you're just going to go ahead and wrath the board, you just go ahead and draw a card off of it. Like you're breaking up in card advantage even more.
Yeah,
So I
100%.
like this. I like this card a lot, um, and it just needs to find a home. If this finds a home, then it's going to be a great card in that deck.
Yeah. I want to talk about another 2-mana blue enchantment that I just look at, and every time I read it, I'm like, surely it doesn't do all of that. But this is a saga called Gadwick's First Duel. So 2 mana, the first thing it does is put a cursed roll token attached to one target creature. So it turns one of your opponent's creatures into a 1/1.
Very useful.
It can even go on one of your own creatures. It doesn't specify opponent creature. So if you have like a 0/0 with counters on it, this actually buffs that creature. So just fun synergies there. Or if you need an enchantment to do stuff with, bargain later. 2 mana, turn a thing into a 1/1. Now, we've seen that effect before. Usually not playable, but this card does other things too. After that, you scry 2, which is pretty good. And then after that, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell, this I'm thinking draw spell or removal spell, with mana value 3 or less this turn, copy that spell, and you can choose new targets for it. So this is going to turn one of your opponent's creatures into a 1/1, scry 2, and then double a spell that you cast, and it costs 2 mana.
Yeah.
That's a lot of value.
It is a lot of value. It's also very slow, and if you don't have a lot of answers to aggro, that 1/1's still going to hit you for 1 every turn.
That's true.
Yeah, no, I think this is value on a 2-drop, so you gotta love it.
Yeah. Okay, time to enrage everyone who loves green-black mid-range decks. I'm going to go out on a limb, call my shot, because I'm bold, that Mosswood Dread Knight is not that good.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% on that.
It's not that good. The adventure doesn't curve that well into the creature. It's giving you a 3/2. Well, no, for sure. And you can, like, loop it, but the idea of looping it, it's like pay 2 mana for the thing, pay 2 mana for the creature. Like, if it reminds me a little bit of that card from the most recent time we went to Ravnica, that you could, like, pay 3 mana to put 2 counters on it and then get a copy of it out of your deck and then do that again. Because it, like, yes, it gets value and that's not bad, but it's gonna just, like, soak up all your mana and tempo for your turns.
You also have to cast it your next turn.
Right, which is fairly limiting. While you're walking around spending all your mana on 3/2s with trample, you're going to be slowly losing life from the draw effect, and your opponent's going to be doing more than playing 3/2s with trample. I don't deny that this card offers a lot of value, but I don't know. Something about it just seems like it isn't going to live up to the hype and make green-black mid-range amazing.
I think there's better things you can do. And this is one of the more expensive cards we're going over, so obviously we're not with the rest of the world on this, but
yeah,
bold. I couldn't care less about this card. I mean, maybe if this deck already existed and you could slot this in, then it's great. But this is not strong enough to create an archetype and to outpace the cards that already are worth building around.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I want to go on record and say that I love Tough Cookie as a card, and I will be burning all my wild cards on Arena on a Tough Cookie Tezzeret Chromehose Seed Shark deck.
Ooh.
So that's where you'll find me when this set releases.
Tell the good people all about what Tough Cookie does.
I was trying to be quick, but...
Okay, be quick. It's basically a food token as a creature that you can... Yeah, it's a fun little card.
It is a fun little
25
card.
25 cents. I'm going to let you know I don't think it's good, but I'm excited to see what you come up with it.
Oh, no, that card's good. I don't know if it's, like, really good, but it's good.
There's so many cards in here. You know what? You were pushing up against the Commander format being designed for. I don't think... This is one of the least Commander-centered standard sets I've seen in a while.
I do agree with that. I actually really like that about it. Obviously, you have your, like, 30 legendary creatures they put in the set, but it does feel much less designed for Commander than a lot of other sets we've seen, which I like. I do want to talk about Fawn's Bane Troll, just because I feel like I haven't seen anyone else talk about it. So this is a 4 mana, 2 green and a black troll that's a 4/4, and it enters the battlefield with a monster roll token attached to it. So that's an aura that gives it +1/+1 and has trample. So essentially 2 pieces of cardboard and a 5/5 trample creature for 4 mana, which that's not anything necessarily to write home about, but you can pay 1 mana and sacrifice an aura attached to the troll to have it fight a creature you don't control, and if that creature would die, exile it until end of turn as a sorcery. So this is kind of like another built-in 2-for-1 type card. There are neat things you can do where you can put other types of auras on it and get that fight effect more often. But it's the kind of thing, you play this card, you remove your opponent's creature, and then you're left with a 4/4 to beat down when they don't have their blocker anymore. I just think that card does quite a bit, and I haven't seen people talking about it.
Is every card a 2-for-1 at this point?
Well, if every card's a 2-for-1, then a 2-for-1's really a 1-for-1. So you really gotta look for those.
It depends if you're hitting their 1 before they hit your 2. You know what I mean?
Can't argue with that.
Yeah. So I like this card as well. It feels, when you're staring down a 4 mana 5/5 with trample, like, it feels like you're on the back foot automatically. So, and then it has upside, and it can, kill something. If you if you have a deck, there's a 1 mana 3/2 that puts the so how does this work, Rules Lawyer? There's a 1 mana 3/2 that puts a
curse roll token.
Curse roll. If you pay the 1 and then sacrifice it, does it become a 4/4 and then fight? I think it does, right?
Yeah, I would. Yes,
so then
absolutely.
You have a 1 mana 3/2 with upside instead of downside.
Yeah, for sure.
There's some exciting things to do with these roll tokens.
No, I agree. I was thinking about it, and I think that either roll tokens or bargain are going to be busted, just because.
We haven't even talked about the big bargain card. How can we? You're remiss.
Well, everyone's talked about that card.
Everyone's talked about it, as if you needed all your 4-drops tribals to have a tutor for any 4-drop tribal.
Yeah. Hey, this card is expensive. This card is never not going to be expensive.
I think it's overvalued right now.
Probably, but if this card's ever under $20, I'll be surprised.
I think it's where it.
As long as it's in standard, I guess.
Am I supposed to be trying to? Well, standard has like 30 cents impact on the price. I'll tell you that much. So tell me. So, the card is a 4 mana sorcery. It allows you to search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. If this spell was bargains, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. If that spell's mana value is 4 or less, put the exiled card into your hand if it wasn't cast this way. So you got your Blood Tithe Harvester, you got your blood token, you got your Gumdrop Poisoner, you got your food token. Just incidentally, doesn't cost you a thing. And now you beseech the mirror and you fetch your Shieldred, you fetch your One Ring, whatever format you're in, whatever the best 4-drop it is, you can do it. I don't even know if this is something that people have talked about, because this is it jumps off the page card. You don't even need to have the right mana symbols. You can run any 4-drop, just one of in your deck if you have a 4 of Beseech the Mirror, and I think you can find out of color power that you wouldn't normally have.
Like sideboard cards you can bring in that you'll always be able to find with this. So I love Bring to Light as a card, but that card, you need to have 5 colors of mana. It costs 5 mana, and it can only get, I think, creatures, instants, and sorceries or something like that.
Yeah, creature, instants, and sorceries with less than the
for the converge. And so this in mono black. So with Bring to Light, you want to play a lot of 5-drops potentially, because that's like where you're getting the most value on tutoring them into play. But then your deck's full of 5-drops. Having a deck full of 4-drops or less is a lot less clunky, and you don't have to run 5 colors. You can run 1 or 2 colors. This card, maybe bargain will be harder than we think. That's possible, and then this is whatever the uncommon tutor is, Diabolic Tutor.
Diabolic Tutor, which is being slept on as well.
Yeah, and actually it's Diabolic Tutor, but it's harder to cast. But I think this card, I think we're gonna see a lot of this getting shielded or whatever silver bullet out of the sideboard completely ruins your day. So
I think this card can definitely be in older formats. It's definitely not just standard. Just like the downside of grabbing the ring with it is you didn't cast the ring, so you don't get your protection. But the one ring is still a house. So I like this card. I don't think it's. I don't think it's. I think it's overpriced right now. I think it's going to come down to earth. I don't think it's going to ruin everything. I may regret that, but I think shoulder it is worse, if that makes sense. Like, I think this is going to be a powerful card. I think it's going to come down to earth a little bit.
Yeah. Hey, keep doing a Magic podcast on Wilds of Eldraine if you're tired of Shieldred. How about that?
Yeah. Exactly.
Look, both of us. All right, we have to talk about the Virtue Cycle at least briefly, and then we'll wrap it up.
Our due diligence. It's a callback to the original Eldraine. There were legendary artifacts, one for each color. Some were absolutely broken, Embercleave, the Great Henge, and others I loved, like the Magic Mirror, draws a bunch of cards, but weren't quite broken. So we have one from each color, and it just made them adventures.
Why not?
I think the adventures might be just as, if not more powerful than the awesome enchantments that you get at the end of it, for some of these at least. So, Sam, what is your favorite one that we can start off with?
Okay, I have two favorites.
Two favorites, of course. Because
inside of me is two wolves, a Pioneer Wolf and a Commander Wolf. And so for constructed formats, I do think Virtue of Courage is potentially playable, the red one. So it's a 5-mana enchantment. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent. I read that as just damage to an opponent, and I was like, my face was melting off. But non-combat damage to an opponent. You may exile that many cards from the top of your library, and you may play those cards this turn. The adventure is Embereth Blaze, 2-mana instant, 2 damage to any target. This card, just in a deck where you're burning stuff and then you need a top end, like you'd used to run cards like Experimental Frenzy potentially, but if you never got to that top end, that card was dead. This just feels like a way to do that that's also a 2-mana 2 damage burn spell, which granted like isn't that great. So it might not make it just based on maybe that's not enough.
I think it is enough. I mean, it's Bone Crusher Giant, right?
Yeah.
You play that shock a lot. You stomp, play that almost every time, just because it's in your hands. And 2 mana. It's like a free 2-mana shock.
Yep.
In your game.
And I will say, and we keep mentioning this, it's these adventure spells, they're not modal. It's not like a flexible spell that does one thing or the other thing. You get both. So you use it early.
2 mana, 2 damage to any target, draw a card. How busted is that?
Yeah. And you always draw this card, which is always, like, if you're playing a couple of these, 3 or 4 of these in your deck, that first ability is on plan with your deck, and then you're just not going to run out of gas in the late game, which burn decks are wont to do. So
you play this pure burn, though. You're not trying to swing in with creatures. The fun thing, to me at least, is like your 2-mana tappers. None of them come to mind, but there's a ton of them. Like a little alchemist dude. It's like a tap, deal 1 damage to target opponent.
Yeah, Thermo Alchemist.
Yeah, it's an archetype that they're in older formats. I think that's what you want to run with this, because you're going to use the Embereth Blaze, keep their aggro plan down, put them some blockers, get some chip damage in. Then I think you build it differently than most burn decks, because you want to get to 5 mana, and then you want to go absolutely crazy. I think this is such a fun card in Commander, because I love experimental frenzy. You mentioned it, type effects, where you don't know what's going to happen. You're just chucking cards down there, and you could run absolutely dry on this. You could get 7 lands in a row. Who knows what's going to happen to you? Or you can just keep going burn spell into burn spell. I am excited to try. I have my Urabrask. I have my playset of Urabrask from last set that I'm excited to ramp 4 into 5 and then just get a mana for every card. I'm going to kill people down from 50 lives just spamming lightning bolts in their face. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's brave of you, testing the unknown there.
I love
Call it virtue of courage for a
card.
reason.
I'm going to say it's not overpowered, but I do love it. I'm excited to play for it.
All right, and this is another bold statement, certified
Right.
bold hot take. I think virtue of knowledge, the blue
Yes.
virtue, is the only other good one.
Ooh. I'm going to push back on you.
Yeah. Let's talk about virtue of knowledge. Yeah, so it's 5 mana, 4 and a blue enchantment. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So your classic Panharmonicon effect. The adventure for this, Vantress Visions, 2 mana instant, copy target activated or triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. So that's just going to be like a fiddly value piece. There's going to be a bunch of ways to use that. A removal ability, a ETB ability, a fetch land ability.
Rampant growth in blue. What a world we live in. Rampant growth in blue that draws you a card at instant speed.
That's always Panharmonicon, which is pretty good. So I think this just does a lot in Commander. As a 5 mana Panharmonicon, like there are worse cards, Plus you also have this adventure lying around. But that's my hot take. Pushback.
I think it's decent. My pushback is that the other ones are also pretty decent. I think this is more of a commander card, for sure. I like this effect. I would pay 1 more mana to get this effect on an enchantment rather than an artifact, because this card gets. Panharmonicon is just automatically removed by anyone who's ever played against a Panharmonicon before. And enchantments are slightly one of the least interactable permanent types that we still have. It's getting more and more interactable by the day, but I'd still pay an extra mana just to have it on an enchantment. And the Vantress Visions, if you have the right deck, this is a legit spell. Like, I was joking about 2 mana rampant growth, but it is. If you have fetch lands, even if you're on a budget and you have the little terramorphic expanse.
Yeah, Evolving Wilds. Yeah.
Evolving Wilds. The new Shire one, Shire Terrace, which is low-key good card.
Yeah, there are a lot of cheap fetch lands like that, like the Myriad Landscape.
You don't have to be on the Scalding Tarn in order to be getting value out of this. It is one of the more expensive ones, because people really love their Panharmonicons. I think this is going to come down in price. Right now, it's like $11. I think it's coming down in price. Maybe I'm wrong. People just love Panharmonicon effects, but I can see it being played in Commander. I'm a little hesitant about 60 card formats.
Yeah, me too. But okay, so you think the white, black, and green ones are not bad? Elaborate.
Yeah, no, I think they're very good. I think that we'll start with the black one. And I think it's mostly for their adventures. 2 mana, target creature, sorcery. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. You gain 2 life. So good at shutting down aggro. All right, it kills everything except for Adeline, and it gains you 2 life. This is going to buy you a lot of time, because the rest of this deck, I'm telling you, you're going to be running this probably in Esper, and when you get to 7 mana and you've stalled out your opponent in this, you are forcing this to be a grind fest, and you stalled them out. It's an original Shroldred at the beginning of your upkeep. Put target creature from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. I think this is more playable in 60 card formats than it is in Commander. That's a hot take.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're
because
right.
the shouldered effect is super slow for a commander. It sounds really good, but the stuff in the graveyard is just one, and you'd probably rather cast a 7 mana creature of your own than get random whatever dregs are in the graveyard. But
Yeah.
I think this is how a lot of decks are gonna win the value war, and I think the adventure is what makes it playable because you can
Yeah.
absolutely run this against aggro and absolutely outvalue grinding decks.
Okay, so I think I saw 7 mana enchantment and said, "Oh, commander card," and I looked at it and I was like, "Well, it's not that good in commander
Yeah,
even."
yeah.
But
These
I think
adventures, they put these adventures on. These are good adventures.
in 60 card formats.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right. It's just a playable removal spell for a 60 card that when
yeah.
you
If
get
you
to 7 mana, it's gonna just get you the
game
best creature in the
eventually,
graveyard every turn. Yeah.
yeah,
All right, I don't disagree with that one.
yeah. Um, which one? The green one.
Yeah.
The green one is another 7 mana enchantment. It says if you tap a basic land for mana, it produces 3 times that much mana instead. Now, this gets really excited because Nyx Bloom Ancient is just an absolute house. Plus, it's an enchantment, so it doesn't get incidentally swept up by wraths or the most common removal type. However, the downside that I think people are overthinking too much is that if you tap a basic land for mana, it produces 3 times as much instead. I run a Titania landfall deck. It only has 15 forests. Okay, like, it's not going to triple your mana.
Yeah.
However, it's gonna ramp you. Even if you have 3 forests, you're +6. 7 mana +6 every turn. It's playable. But
I,
it's playable.
uh,
It's gonna teach all you sinners to run more basics. I'll tell you that much.
hey, which we're a
However,
fan of at this podcast.
oh, we love basics. Um, however, like, what makes it playable is the sorcery, which is 1 mana. Return target creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. It's a free roll that happens to have this enchantment on there. You're gonna be cracking your terramorphic expanses. You're gonna be having creatures blown up with wraths or whatever. 1 mana, you're not gonna miss it. And then late game, you get to cast this sucker, and you're probably gonna get your mana back on the turn you cast it. You have if you're at that place where you have 7, 8, 9, 10 mana, you're gonna cast this and you're gonna have an absolute banger of a next turn. And it didn't even cost you a card. So
Nah.
I think this is absolutely I think it's only commander playable. I'm gonna stretch and say that.
All right, I'm gonna push back
Alright, push back, push back.
because I think this card is like cheeks. Like I think this card is bad because
Oh
you
no.
you play it late game and then you're not getting your mana ramped because you tapped out or spent most of your mana to play
Right.
this
Okay.
card, which doesn't do anything. And then people are either gonna remove this or like, are you gonna have cards in your hand at that point in the game? Maybe, because maybe you use Garen Big Growth, the adventure, to return
Yeah.
like a creature land card from your graveyard to your hand. But if you're playing this for that effect, couldn't it be a card that you just want to have in your hand instead of a card that gets you something from a limited selection of graveyard cards? Like, it's one of those classic, like, it could be anything, could even be a boat situations. But, like, you could
Right.
just.
I would rather have the boat here because the your graveyard's gonna have cards in it. Um, at some point, your graveyard's gonna have cards in it. And regrowth is a really powerful effect because you're gonna play creatures that you love. You're gonna have, even if it just gets you your terramorphic expanse back, fine. But I think this a 1 mana regrowth effect. I think it's playable, and I think the enchantment is just additional upside. I don't think they balanced these cards, understanding that they're just giving you free 7 mana enchantments. So I don't think the enchantment's as powerful, but I do think that like get this down, you're gonna be the arch enemy at the table immediately because you're gonna have 6 more mana than anybody else
Yeah, you say that.
at least.
Say that like it's a good thing. That's how you play this card, you lose the game. That's how I read
Yeah. All right.
that.
Yeah. Well, there's a price to be paid for everything. This card reads a lot more scary than it is because people have gotten destroyed by Nyx Bloom Ancients before, and like your mana rocks and everything, and that deck wants to ramp lands and mana rocks anyways. But I think if you're in a green deck and you have ways to use mana, and you're on the true path of running basics, it's a pretty good card.
All right. With the white one, what's going on with the white one?
White one. All right. This is meh. It's good, but it's meh. I don't think Virtue of Loyalty, I believe it's called.
Yep, Virtue of Loyalty.
This is a 5-mana enchantment. It says at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Untap those creatures. Then the adventure is 2 mana, instant, create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. I think this is better in 60 card formats, and I'm not sure what type it's going to be, because there are token decks. A 2/2, it's an instant 2/2 token with vigilance is okay. It's not human, which is a huge knock against it, but it's playable. And then the enchantment side is not playable. Like, I think there's a 3-mana version of this effect in Standard. It's in 3 colors, but it's 3 mana, and it gets a little bit of play. So for 5 mana, giving everyone pseudo vigilance,
yeah,
I think it's good enough.
No, I think this sees play in 2 places. I think it sees play in Knight Tribal Commander decks because it's flavorful and makes a Knight.
Yeah, you can absolutely.
And I think this sees play in like flying Tribal Commander decks because giving your flyers pseudo vigilance and buffing them is actually pretty good, but the adventure's kind of useless at that point.
Yeah, I have a Flyers deck. I wouldn't run it in that.
Yeah.
Just run favorable wins. It's pretty reasonable. It's not bad, but it's not good. You can run it if this is the type of gameplay that's exciting to you, of just having creatures and them getting stronger. Like, if this sits on the battlefield for 7 turns, you're probably gonna win, right? But that's not really how Magic is played in 2023.
Yeah, I think like in a Flyersy deck, you could sit on the battlefield for like 2 turns or 3 turns and winning the game. But yeah, point taken. I agree. It's like kind of meh, but I don't think I would even consider playing it anywhere except those 2 places.
Yeah, if it was a white human creature token, I think it could definitely be played. But most of the decks that are running these low to the ground creatures are not hitting 5 mana, and once you hit 5 mana, your board's been wrathed or you've won. So I don't think that there's a 60 card archetype for it. I think if you play a lot of low to mid power commander games, you probably love this card, but you're not. And it's a fun card. I love the value. There's fun things you can do with +1/+1 counters. There's some fun things you can do with untapping creatures. It's not vigilance. Untapping those creatures at the end of combat can be better in a lot of situations. So if you have the deck and you think it's fun, run it, but it's nowhere near as strong as the other ones.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Okay, I think we've talked about every single card in Wilds of Eldraine, right?
We haven't talked about my favorite one, though.
You have a pocket favorite pick at
pocket favorite one
at the 11th hour, and I mean that literally.
well, first of all, did we mention what is this card? The 2-mana Charming Scoundrel.
No, we haven't talked about Charming Scoundrel.
Charming Scoundrel's broken. It's broken. It's good in so many different archetypes. It has modal things. It's not my favorite card, but this card is broken.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay. Well, agree to disagree. People run the stupid goblin that does this and doesn't have modal things and is double red. Has a lot of different places where you want to play this. And I think it's going to get played in X for almost all of its modes. And expect to see a lot of this, especially in Standard. But,
Okay.
Secret card that I'm gonna get 2 of, hoping they come down in price. I think it's overpriced right now, but it's Kellen the Fey-Blooded.
Yeah.
This is a legendary human fairy. It could be your commander, and it has a sorcery birthright boon. Search your library for an aura or equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. And then it has its creature side is a 2/2 double striker. Other creatures you control get +1/+0 for each aura and equipment attached to Kellen Fey-Blooded. As a commander, it's kind of interesting to have what is essentially open the armory in your command zone. And compared to other Boros equipment cards, the actual creature's not that exciting. It doesn't draw you cards. It kind of wants you to go wide, but also Voltron-y. But I'm excited to put this in my 2 of my decks because Open the Armory gets you Skull Clamp. I'm so excited to have another way to get Skull Clamp. It's the best card in the format. It's amazing. And then you get to just get a free 2/2 human that you can sacrifice to Skull Clamp and draw cards.
Yeah,
So,
I don't disagree. I think this is a slam dunk. They've made so many like equipment Boros commanders over the years, and this is the only one that I'm like, oh, I like that.
I disagree. I think it's bad as a commander. I think it's kind of antithetical to have a tutor in your command zone, in my opinion, because you're gonna be looking for the same thing. I really like the way this interacts with the Anduril Flame of the West card from Lord of the Rings, where it buffs you and gives you creatures. That's kind of fun to me. I don't think it's the best way to do it. Normally, when you're playing this deck as an equipment deck, you want to get your ramping blade. Well, I forget what it's called.
Sword of the Animist.
Sword of the Animist.
There you go.
You get your Sword of the Animist, and you just ramp like crazy. I feel like if you have artifacts or sorry, aristocrat synergies, you're gonna get Skull Clamp. If you're a normal person, you're gonna have Blade of the Animist, and you're gonna get it every time. So I'm not that excited for it as a commander, but in the 99, it's just amazing.
Yeah, fair. And hey, I'll pull back the curtain for our listeners. When we were talking about doing this, we were like, hey, let's take like 20 minutes and talk about a handful of cool cards.
Where
I mean,
are we at right now?
like an hour and a half plus, but you know, it's just, time flies when you're having fun. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I had fun.
Well,
I think that I don't regret anything.
well, maybe I'll regret this. I have one more card. I swear, this is the last one.
How many? Yeah.
This is actually the last
What's the
one.
one card that we haven't talked about?
Collector's Vault.
All right, let me pull
So
it
this is a 2-mana artifact. Because I just feel like we haven't talked about, monetary mentor. We're trying to help the people with their value pickups. This card, Skyfall is telling me it's like 40 cents right now. It's a 2-mana artifact. You pay 2 mana, you tap it, you draw a card, then discard a card, which is a nice order to do those things, and then you create a treasure token. This card, for 2 mana, an artifact that can go on a lot of decks, essentially any deck in Commander. It draws you cards, it gives you a way to discard cards, it creates treasure tokens. It's like low investment. I think this is one of those cards that can go almost anywhere and you'll never be sad to see it. So I did want to flag this as, especially if you're in a deck that cares about discarding cards or artifacts or treasure tokens, I think this card has a lot to offer.
Yeah, I think I'm going to test it in my Brutaclad deck. It creates a token, and it gives you card selection. Card selection is so valuable. And it essentially only casts 1 mana with upside to activate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
would
like
say
this.
1 mana to loot most times.
Yeah, I like this card a lot. I ordered a foil in my Sir Ginger pre-order. I was like, it's got to go in my Fur Crag deck. So
This is a great Sir Ginger card, by the way.
It's not bad. It's not bad. Because Sir Ginger's busted and best card in the set. Bringing it full circle as we are finally done, I swear. No, shut up.
I need to get all these combos out.
We literally can't, but I will reiterate that card's really good. Because the listener has to know.
I don't know if it's good. It's very fun.
I know that it's good. All right, party people. I can't believe we're still here. I know. I
You're
can't
still
believe
here.
it.
You're a hero. Hopefully, it was entertaining, and you're not just sleeping right now.
Hey, that counts as
What
views. We
Yeah,
we take
all
those.
the way to the end. All the way
That's
to the
right.
end. All the way to the bank.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you again soon. And that does it. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please like the video. And please reach out to me with any questions, either in the comments or on Twitter at Monetary Mentor. I look forward to hearing from you, and until then, be kind to yourself and have fun out there.